Hello faithful viewers and welcome back to another review. This time we're looking at the Star Wars Black Series, Obi-Wan Kenobi show, Grand Inquisitor. Yes, this is the Grand Inquisitor who originally debuted in Star Wars Rebels, but this is the live action interpretation of him. But before we look at the figure proper, let's once again put him to the side and take a look at the Black Series packaging. Now, this doesn't really differ from the regular Black Series packaging that we are used to at this point, except I've left the price stickers on. So you can see he cost me £14.99 at a discounted price from HMV over here in the UK. Crazy deals, I suppose. Anyway, your standard Black Series packaging, but the blue colorization for the Obi-Wan show, Grand Inquisitor, you've got the mural artwork there. On the back, it reads, Obi-Wan Kenobi is set years after the dramatic events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Kenobi faced the corruption of his friend and Jedi apprentice Anakin Skywalker turned Sith Lord Darth Vader. Nothing about the Grand Inquisitor himself. So once again, this is the Grand Inquisitor as portrayed by Rupert Friend in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I've got him in a pose here, which is very reminiscent of the fighting style that the Grand Inquisitor would have in Rebels. Because, let's be honest, in Kenobi he didn't exactly do much apart from get stabbed. You could tell from his fighting style in Rebels that he was a Makashi practitioner, so that's the same style as Count Dooku, given that he would spend a lot of his time fighting one-handed like this, in kind of a fencing position, if you will. But if we take him out of that stance and take a look at him in greater detail, we can see that he is sporting the unfortunate egghead, which is, you know, a repercussion of a live-action interpretation of the character. Having said that, though, there were Powans in Revenge of the Sith who had the elongated heads, so quite why they couldn't do this in Kenobi beats me, especially considering he didn't want to get into any action of any kind. What differs also between the live action version as represented here and the Rebels interpretation, there are a few things on the head. We can see he does still have like the dark side markings that are on his forehead and underneath his eyes there. They are reminiscent spookily of the sun from the Mortis arc in Clone Wars. That's just a coincidence though. They are on this figure kind of like a purple, light lilac-y kind of colour, whilst in Rebels, if I remember correctly, they were like a nice deep red. So that's an inconsistency. And also the main thing arguably is the eyes, and a lot of people did have a problem with this, especially when the trailers were coming out. He's got the yellow pupils as you would expect, but you can see the whites of his eyes. They were meant to be black. It's a nitpick, and there is a lot of me which is tempted to maybe customise this figure, but I'm a wee bit scared too because I have no experience of customising figures. Anyway, moving on. If the rest of his attire here is reminiscent of his Rebels look, obviously made for a more live-action interpretation. He does bear the Grand Inquisitor signia on his chest there, which was original for the Kenobi show. That did not exist prior to this. He does have a little red kind of illumination there. I think it's meant to be an illumination of some kind. His chest armour drapes down to his lower abdomen. He's got a utility belt there full of colourful buttons. He does have armour over the thighs as well. Nice, lovely red cape, which we'll have a look at again in a second. His pants here are kind of bunched at the knees to suggest that they are quite loose-fitting, but they've obviously been crunched into his form-fitting boots here, which are nicely sculpted too. And then you've got the lightsaber, which we'll have another look at in a second. And then coming to the back of the figure here, we can see that the cape kind of drapes underneath this panel, and I'll demonstrate how you remove the cape in a short second. You've got some little slots there where the lightsaber tabs in, because the Inquisitors, most of them at least, hold their lightsabers on their backs. There are the odd one or two of them, like the Seventh Sister, for example, who hang them off their belts. But the Grand Inquisitor here, he does have it on his back. And yeah, just overall, he is a very faithful representation of how the character looks in live action, with a lot of references to his Rebels interpretation in there also. So let's take a look at the cape, shall we? Now, it is a cloth good, it's not like a static piece of plastic, and that is quite nice for the aesthetic of the character, but you know, it doesn't half bunch up right there, and I'm not really that big of a fan of it bunching up there, to be honest. Now, I do like the way it looks. There is a nice deep crimson on the inside here, and you know, you're just kind of basic black, but it's really quite elegant and really quite nice. Again, I don't like the way it bunches up, but you know, it's accurate to how he looks in the Kenobi live action show, but if you want to have a more accurate Rebels interpretation, because of course in Rebels, for budgetary reasons especially, they don't tend to animate characters with cloaks all that often. You know, Count Dooku for a lot of Clone Wars didn't have his signature cloak on. Why? Money, that's why. Because flowing animatics in animation apparently are expensive. So to take this off, it is primarily hooked in underneath the front torso bit here. So if we kind of lift this over his head like this, and then try to shimmy these little bits here through the gap between the back plate and the front plate on his shoulders, just like that, and then just like that, and then just unhook it through that, and there you go. That is the cloak removed. Get that to the side, and here is the Grand Inquisitor, looking more like his animation accurate self. I don't know which version I prefer, actually. On one hand, I like the silhouette of the cloak / cape being on him, but also, you know, to have him a bit more closer to the Rebels interpretation of himself, I like that option as well. So, you know, the option's there to display him how you will. Coming to his lightsaber, we can see it is displayed in crescent mode, and it is obviously one of those Inquisitorious lightsabers which do a whole spinny helicopter blade kind of thing. Now, I've got one blade in here because obviously I like him as a Makashi practitioner. He does come with a second blade, so you can display him with like your Darth Maul kind of lightsaber form style, if you will. This does not spin in any way, shape or form, because that is kind of physically impossible with the scale that we're working with here. And you can, as I said before, display him with this attached on his back, and it just tabs in nice and securely. If I can get my tabs lined up, there we go, just on his back like that. And let's just get that in focus so you can appreciate the storage mechanics of his lightsaber hilt. Voila. Turning our attention to articulation then, so the Grand Inquisitor's head can rotate 360 degrees, like so. He is also one of these new figures with the independently articulated neck, which I really don't like. Just because you turn the head and you accidentally turn the neck, and you turn the head back, but the neck joint stays in place from where it turned, which just makes it look very, very messy. And also, I will just critique something, because I've had him positioned for a while with his head looking that way, and I've just moved it back for the sake of this review. And I've just noticed, if I can demonstrate it on camera, you see that little bit of grey on his neck there? That's paint scuffing. I don't think that was there previously, so just bear that in mind when articulating this figure. Parts of it could scuff. But anyway, so you've got that neck articulation as well, which I really don't like. He can look down about that far, and he can look up about that far. When it comes to the shoulders, you have arguably 360 degrees of rotation, with the shoulder pads moving out of the way to accommodate said articulation. So that's good. Spread his arms out that far. He, at the elbow, has an over 90 degree bend. It's not a double joint as far as I can tell, it's just a single. He also has a 360 degree swivel at said elbow. In terms of wrists, this one has in and out, and so does the other one. And once again, I pause just because that's not always the case. He does also seem to have a butterfly joint, with his shoulders being able to move backward, so you know, it could be skydiving, I suppose. Fortunately, the armour pieces don't really get in the way of articulation, and by that I'm really thinking about the back and the chest pieces, because we've established that these shoulder things do move out of the way, so that is very much appreciated. In terms of the torso, he can limbo only about that far, and he can forward crunch about that far. He can rotate at the upper torso as well, 360 degrees. In terms of kicks, he has a forward kick of about that far. Back kick only really about that far before it starts to move out. And in terms of a spread, and once again these leg armour pieces are moving out of the way to accommodate, he has a decent spread. He's got the new ball jointed hips here, so you've got a nice movement option there. And unlike figures like Hera and the new Ahsoka, he also has the upper leg rotation. At the knee, he's got an over 90 degree bend, he's got 360 rotation there as well, and in terms of the ankles, he has the rocker pivot, and he also has up and down, which you need to be very careful where you grasp the figure to utilise that. So overall articulation, I would say, is above average for Black Series, especially considering other more modern ones seem to be lacking the extra leg articulation there. So well done, Grand Inquisitor, you've done well for that. So to put the cape back on, let's take a look. We want to, for a start, get this over his noggin and make sure his head is through the little gap there, and then pull it all the way forward and take the loop part of it basically and get it underneath the chest flap like that. Don't be afraid to move this out, it is a very soft rubber, it will reshape itself without any problem, and just try and get that hooked as far as you can like that, and then try and take the flap here of the chest and bring it out so you can move that bit basically through this trench which is there. And also don't be afraid to do the same to the back plate as well, just lifting it up and out of the way to accommodate the cloak. And then the same on this side, try and thread it through to the centre whilst getting that bit over like that. And then, okay, it's been a hot minute since I've done this actually. Just try and get that threaded through. Also trying to do this at a slight distance from the figure in a recording setup, you'd appreciate is difficult. But you want to just try and thread that through there. Thread that through there so the armour is basically on top. That's more or less it. Once again, it's not perfect. It is, very messy because it is cloth goods. If they could have found some way to put some piping of some kind in there to just make it a little bit more rigid, it might work better. But there we go, that is the cape back on. Apologies if that was all out of focus. Once again, I'm sure you could appreciate the difficulties of a review setup when handling figures. For comparisons then, here is the Grand Inquisitor next to General Hera Syndulla. Both of these figures represent their live action versions of the characters. But if you want an animation comparison, here is your live action Grand Inquisitor next to your animation accurate Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels. Next to your standard deluxe class Transformer, here he is next to Transformers Prime First Edition RC. And to see how he scales against a modern Voyager class figure, here he is next to our knockoff Studio Series Optimus Prime. And then for Marvel Legends, here he is with Mysterio. Alright then, so that has been our look at the Black Series Grand Inquisitor from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Overall, I think this is a pretty decent figure, certainly in terms of articulation. Despite the armour pieces, they do move out of the way, as I've said. You can have your qualms about the live-action interpretation of the character and how he looks in terms of translation, but, until they release a Rebels version, this is the best of what you're going to get, and I don't think they're going to release a Rebels version anytime soon. So basically, folks, just live with it. It's good enough, isn't it? Now, he is definitely a shelf warmer or a peg warmer or whatever term you want to use for a figure that doesn't sell well, but I would still recommend picking at least this guy up. If you're not really hot about any of the other Inquisitors, then get your main man here because he is still the best one. even though Second Sister from, Fallen Order is pretty good. But the Grand Inquisitor is the GOAT when it comes to the Inquisitorius. You've got the customization option also with being able to remove the cloak. He's highly articulated, and, customize him if you want. If you want him to look more accurate to the Rebels version, then customize him, paint him up, go for it. By all means. I don't think I will, but I've contemplated it. So, yeah. I think overall, I do recommend the Grand Inquisitor here. So thank you everybody so much for stopping by and checking out this video. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it around to help out the channel. And until the next time, see you all later.